giving you that cue. So we are recording, and we do appreciate if you keep your videos on if you like. It just helps make this feel like it is, more like a live meeting. But if you need breaks or that don't feel comfortable, that's fine too. We can see you, and we want to make sure that you feel heard. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, just want to orient you a little bit to the controls. Down at the bottom, you've got your mute sign on the left and your stop video next to it. There's a chat box right almost in the middle. And you also can hit on the CC live transcript button if you want to see the presentation, this closed captions as it's being presented. And finally, there's a reaction site where you can, with a little smiley face, where you can raise your hand there or give another reaction if you want. And just ways for us to communicate when we really can't always see our nonverbals. And I'll also, with this, the number of people here, to the extent that I can with videos on, can also acknowledge you with questions with hands up too. So we can use old school routines there too. Looks like we have a few more people joining us. Just want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of outreach done with regard to making sure people know about these meetings. The city contacted the Maplewood, Ogden, and Fourth Plain neighborhoods, as well as reaching out through Next Door to the former Bagley Downs and Meadow Homes organizations. And there's been news articles and lots of different ways that we try to make sure that people are aware of this. And there's also a website where you can always stay up to date on what is happening with these things. Want to just acknowledge all the community members that are here. I also understand we have some members of the press, as well as some folks from other jurisdictions who are interested to see what is Vancouver doing with regard to these safe state communities. And I think you're going to see that Vancouver's safe state communities are becoming a model for other places as well. Also want to just acknowledge that we do have many city staff here who are supporting both this presentation and the safe state community effort. And so I'm just going to let you know who's in the room. So we'll start with, we have Deputy City Manager Lon Pluckhan. If you want to just raise your hand or smile, there he is. We have Tim Becker, who is the city's communication manager. Did I get that right? And William Cooley, who is community engagement manager. Might not get your titles correct. We have Jamie Spinelli. And Jamie, tell me your correct title again.
I'm the homeless response coordinator for the city.
That's what I was going to say. I just want to make sure I got all the words in. Judy Bailey with the Office of Neighborhoods. Carrie Peck with the City Manager's Office, who's been the project manager for a lot of the safe sites. Let's see, who else do we have that I'm missing? We've got some behind the scenes folks as well. Anna Quintrell, who's helping let people in and the chat. Anybody else I missed from the city? I think I got everybody. Right. Oh,
Tyler and Sheila.
Right. Tyler from the City of Vancouver Police Department, and Sheila Andrews, and they're part of the HEART program that they're going to tell you about a little bit later. And then we have the folks that have been helping manage the first Safe State community site, Adam Kravitz. And Adam, if you can say hello, and Ren Autry as part of Outsiders In. And then we also have Brian Norris, who is with Living Hope Church, and he is, Living Hope is the contractor for this second site. So did I miss anybody, Judy, that I just want to make sure folks know is in the room?
Neighborhood Police Officer Corporal Sean Matibia is.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Sean. Welcome. All right. I think with that, I am going to turn it over to Lon, who's got some words of welcome for you all.
Thank you, Nancy. I just wanted to echo your comments about welcoming everybody from the neighborhood and the public that is taking some time out of their day to come and attend our second outreach session about what we hope is the site of our second Safe Stay community. The city of Vancouver pivoted the strategy that we were using to address homelessness in the community to really start using a model to help to try to provide a stable living situation for people that are unhoused and create kind of a springboard for them to be able to re-enter more permanent and more stable housing. And this is the second of what we'd anticipate being 4 to 5 proposed sites that are built around the Safe Stay villages. And we are continuing to comb the community for hopefully a second site for another safe park, which would be another one of our vehicle-based locations as well. From my perspective, being fairly new to Vancouver, but having a longer background in homelessness response, it's been really gratifying to see that we're doing one that is returning really outstanding results from the first of the Safe Stay communities. And it's our hope that we can really duplicate that with Safe Stay 2. It's beyond, working beyond my expectations, and really have high hopes for doing this one that even though we know that this is not a long-term solution, it takes time to get the long-term solutions and support systems that we need to really address the root causes of homelessness up and operating. But this has so far been a great way for us to provide an immediate response and help to stabilize folks in their living situations. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn the meeting over, and we'll provide you some information about the specifics of what the program does and some of the things that we've seen so far.
Great. Thank you, Lon. And it's really great to hear that, from your perspective, looking at the program so far, it's exceeding your expectations. And that I hope the community will be able to hear a little bit more about what's been happening with Safe Stay Site 1. One thing I wanted to let you know, and we did send a little note in the chat letting you know that that's a way that you can ask questions here tonight too. We will have the agenda will be first. We're going to do some presentation about the city's efforts with regard to the homeless situation in the city, and how to address things that are immediately happening here, as well as giving you a chance to meet the providers. And you heard, Adam and Ren and Brian are all here to tell you a little bit about their work and what their intentions are. And then the majority of time is really for you to be able to ask questions. And so we'll be able to have you do that a couple of different ways. You can do that in the chat, or raising your hand, or so we'll get to that a little bit later in the program. But we also thought it's helpful to know who's in the room here today, who's on the Zoom room, right? So we're going to do a little poll and just ask you to identify, which of these best describes you, in terms of where you're coming from for this meeting today. So just take a minute. We'll take about 30 seconds or so for folks to answer that poll. And Judy, just let me know when it looks like you've got critical mass. Or I guess this is William doing it, right?
Yeah, thank you to those who've responded so far. I think we'll give folks about another 10 seconds.
All right, so let's take a look. Almost a third of you live nearby, or about 20% nearby, working at a business. And then almost half are in another part of the city. So, and then we've got folks from other places, including myself. I was a long time employee in Vancouver, running a nonprofit, and now I'm living in Portland. So. All right, thank you for that. And thank you all for sharing a little bit about where you're from. And I'm going to, I guess I've already gone over the agenda, skipped ahead, didn't I? So the other thing we wanted to say is for some of you, it might feel uncomfortable to talk while a meeting's being recorded. And if you have some specific questions you want to ask, we'll also be staying after the meeting. And you can talk to people if you have some more personal questions. So we've got about a half an hour. This meeting is scheduled to go till 5:30 if needed. And whenever we're ready to close it, we'll turn off the recording, and then anybody who wants to stay and ask any more questions, we'll hang out. So, all right, let's see. I think at this point I am ready to go through the conversation guidelines. And what this does is it really just helps us have a good experience with each other here, and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate, ask questions, feel included. So really want to encourage you to speak from your experience. Listen to understand each other. So just like that reaction button, turning on the understanding button just really changes how you hear things. Respect differences. So what this means is, you may not agree, but you're willing to listen and be curious about why people think a certain way. Give everybody a chance to participate. And I always say, like, if you got more than one question, like, make sure everybody's got a first round before you take seconds, right? And we'll make sure we have plenty of time to answer all your questions. And so far in all of these that we've done, no one's walked away without their questions being answered. So, and we really welcome them. We really want to hear what's on your mind, what your concerns are. There are things that we are not aware of, that it's helpful to know. This program, in terms of the Safe Stay community, was built with much community input, and it's continuing to, part of its success is going to be, based on that input and making sure that your needs are also addressed. So with that, I think we are finally ready for Jamie to give us a little overview of the City of Vancouver's efforts and what this program is about.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, everyone, for coming. So my name is Jamie Spinelli, and I am the Homeless Response Coordinator for the City of Vancouver. My role here at the city is to address the impacts of unsheltered homelessness specifically. So we've got other staff that work on things like developing affordable housing, contracts for rental assistance and other housing programs. But my job is to manage how the city deals with what we are seeing outside in the tents, so that more chronically unsheltered population. So homelessness has become a big issue in our community, I think, at least more visible over the last 3 to 5 years, and we are not alone in that. Homelessness has reached crisis levels kind of all over the country, even though it may look different in other parts of the country, based on their shelter capacity. So for example, I've seen a lot of comments on social media about things like, people have visited New York City and it doesn't look as bad as what we're seeing here. And that's largely because New York has a right to shelter law, which requires that their cities ensure that there is enough shelter capacity for anyone experiencing homelessness there. And so that's different all across the country. I think, interestingly enough, nationwide, our overall numbers for homelessness have actually decreased, but unsheltered homelessness specifically has increased drastically. And I think that's largely because of HUD's funding priorities. And that could be a whole other webinar, but that is the case. So while the increase in the amount of people we're seeing living outdoors here seems to be fairly new to a lot of people, we've actually been experiencing similar numbers for quite some time. The visibility has increased significantly since 2020, and that's largely because of COVID. So in order to reduce transmission of the virus, CDC and public health agencies kind of all over the country recommended leaving camps in place in most cases. So people who have been experiencing unsheltered homelessness for a lot of years have been able to just set up in one spot and mostly be left alone for a couple of years now. And that's a pretty significant change from how we addressed camps pre-COVID. Also due to COVID, our community and many others have not conducted an unsheltered point in time count since just prior to the pandemic. Although we did actually just do one today. I have been up since very early this morning counting people outside. Data from our last Unsheltered point in time count showed we had just over 500 people living outside in Clark County. I think it's important to note that's largely an undercount. It's just meant to give us a snapshot of one point in time and compare that data year over year. Let's see, where am I at? I lost my place in my notes. I'm very tired. So the graphic before this showed a few reasons that individuals report experiencing homelessness, but there are many reasons that someone can fall into homelessness. The homeless community is just as diverse as the housed community, and because of that, solutions need to be diverse as well. So there is no one single solution to this. Now we can go to the next slide. And in that same vein, there is no one single entity that will be able to solve homelessness. Addressing homelessness requires a great deal of public and private partnership. So city, county, nonprofits, the faith community, and many individual residents in our community, as well as all over the country, are working together to address homelessness in some way. And these are just some of them. There are many more that include like behavioral health organizations, healthcare organizations, etc. Next slide, please. So last May, a plan for addressing the impacts of unsheltered homelessness was presented to and supported by our city council. I want to be very upfront about the fact that this plan is not intended to end homelessness. It's intended to address the very immediate and clear health and safety crisis of people living outdoors in our community, and all of the challenges that crisis brings with it. So the trash, the solid waste, people camping in public spaces, difficulties accessing services for those folks who are living outside, developing the amount of affordable housing, and even just brick and mortar shelter needed to support everyone who needs it in this community will likely take years. And it's not healthy or safe for anyone in this community, housed or unhoused, or even for our environment, for people to be living in tents along the freeways, in our trail systems, or in vehicles on our streets as they work to resolve their homelessness. In fact, living on our streets as they work, as they're working on that, it makes it exponentially more difficult to take those steps needed to exit homelessness. So just briefly, the plan includes providing greater sanitation and access to hygiene services at large camps across the city, assessing camps for solid waste cleanup needs, and then conducting those cleanups regularly, supplementing those large cleanups with utilizing Share's Talk and Trash program, which also kind of doubles as a low barrier employment opportunity for individuals with lived experiences with homelessness. Outsiders In is providing mail service for people without a permanent address. And we also operate a safe park program where individuals living in their vehicles can safely park in their cars off the streets or RVs as they work to resolve their homelessness. And that program is staffed 24/7. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Safe State communities help us get people off the streets and into safer, as Lon said earlier, more humane living conditions so that they can stabilize and work on more permanent housing. Because we want them to be safe and effective for everyone, including the surrounding community, we're keeping them small with just space for 20 to 40 people. They're staffed 24/7 with service providers that are very familiar and comfortable with working with the unhoused community. All Safe State communities will have screened fencing. They'll provide sanitation and hygiene services and offer a whole range of supportive services on site. Again, these are meant to be temporary transitional spaces as people move on to something more permanent. So while the plan isn't intended to end homelessness, I do think that it supports the overall plan of helping everyone obtain more permanent housing for themselves. Next slide, please. So this particular site is being proposed because it meets the site selection criteria that City Council approved last year, as well as some of their priorities, which includes needing to be within a half-mile of public transit, being equitably spaced away from other supportive sites around the city, so as not to overburden any one particular area or neighborhood. So the first site that we have operating is over on 112th off of 51st. We are, as much as possible, trying to avoid residential areas that are considered more economically vulnerable. And then they really wanted to focus on attempting to serve people as close to where they already are as possible. So we're not looking to move people into or out of a particular area. Because just like the house community, I mean, people experiencing homelessness also choose where they camp or where they stay for reasons like being close to family or supports, close to services that are important to them, or even just because they're more comfortable in a particular area, or they're more familiar with it. We've also included a 1,000-foot no camping buffer around each site, again, because we don't want to overburden any one area. And this is something that can be and will be enforced by the HEART team, NPOs like Corporal Matibia who's here, or just law enforcement in general. So the first Safe Stay community opened on December 23rd last year, just before Christmas and the snow came. It's managed by Outsiders In, who is doing a phenomenal job. In just the 2 months that it's been open, we've already got people who have obtained employment, some who've completed detox and treatment, people accessing mental health services, needed medications, lots of people replacing lost IDs, and a few who have just recently been referred to housing programs and should be moving out probably within the next month or so. So people really are using this opportunity to move forward, and it is working exactly as it should, and even faster than we anticipated. I don't know if Ren and Adam want to add anything to that regarding the first site. They work at Outsiders In.
Hi, yeah, Adam Kravitz here. Thank you everyone for coming. Jamie, you really did say it rather well. It is faster than we thought. Really, folks have stabilized, and they've really taken to the support and the encouragement and the understanding that we have brought to the table, and it's become a community. And we're very happy with how the community is coming around and is supporting each other. A lot of the support comes from the folks themselves. They already had relationships, and we were there to become part of that and to help support that and find out where we can help them address those barriers. And we've done really good as a team. They've helped us and we've helped them, and we're very happy with where we're at.
Thank you. Okay. Let me throw the slideshow back up. Thank you, William. I think the next one is just some photos of what the insides of the shelters, the little shelters look like. Yeah, there we go. So each of these are small spaces, just 64 square feet, but they do each have power, lighting, heat, outlets so people can charge their phone, 2 beds in each one. Very basic, but absolutely keep people warmer and drier than tents. Next slide, please. This was at the grand opening back in December. Most of these people are actually service providers, all of whom visit the site to provide various supportive services to site residents. So there's mental health, there's outreach, there's nursing, there's recovery support, and all of these folks will visit the second site as well as subsequent sites. Next slide, please. So Living Hope Church has been selected through an RFP process to manage the second Safe Stay community, wherever that may be located. So it will be their job to maintain safety, cleanliness, and security of the site. They'll have it staffed 24/7, and they'll be working with folks on transitioning out of homelessness, just as Outsiders In is doing at the other site. Living Hope has been an excellent partner over the years in serving our unhoused neighbors. So for several years, they have provided the only walk-in severe weather shelter during our coldest months. They've got weekly outreach services that people can attend for getting a hot meal, food box, shower, clothing closet. And in 2020, they partnered with both the city and Council for the Homeless to open a tent camp on their property for several months at the beginning of COVID to ensure that some folks had a way to shelter in place. So while Safe Stay communities are a fairly new concept here in Vancouver, serving our homeless neighbors are certainly nothing new for Living Hope Church. I don't know if Brian wants to share anything about their hopes for the site, or anything else that they are working on.
Sure. So Brian Norris with Living Hope Church, and I've been kind of overseeing our homeless outreach and recovery services here for about 8 years. And this is just another extension. You know, when the city came up with the idea, we were super excited to step in and see where we could assist. It's always been the heart of the church here to do what we can for our community to be an asset. Like Jamie already talked about, we year round do 2 days where we open up, provide food, clothing, showers, and more importantly, just hope and letting people know that they matter, that they loved, and we're just here to assist them and help them transition on. And we'll continue doing that stuff even with this. This is just an extension of what we're already doing. Like this week with the cold weather, we've been open all week, probably through Friday, just completely low barrier. Come as you are, just stay safe and get a hot meal in your belly, warm place to sleep. And at that time, it's just building trust with many of the folks that are outside right now. And some of those will be people that we actually possibly interview to see if it's something for them to move into the next stay safe. So that's all I got right now.
Thanks. Okay, so to kind of bring it back to our overall goal of addressing the immediate health and safety crisis, these safe state communities play a role in providing for the safety and security of everyone in our community. So the folks who desperately need some shelter and stability to move forward in life, but also the surrounding community. There are already many people camping in this area, in this general area, just as there are in other parts of the city. So in addition to providing safer spaces for people to transition from homelessness, these sites will also reduce some of the kind of random unsanctioned camping that we're currently seeing across the city, but specifically in that area, down the Burnt Bridge Creek area, Campus Drive, up on Stapleton. I've also asked each contracted service provider, so Living Hope as well as Outsiders In, to do some very intentional community building. There tends to be a pretty large divide between housed and unhoused community members, unfortunately. And I think that closing that gap can only make our whole community healthier. So neighborhoods with safe state communities will eventually see those residents out helping clean up the neighborhoods and participating in community and neighborhood events, because we truly do want these to be assets to neighborhoods, not burdens. And I believe that what we're seeing at our first site out at 51st is great evidence that that's possible. So like I mentioned earlier, both the HEART team and the neighborhood police officers can be called to enforce that no camping buffer, as well as address other safety concerns. The site will be staffed 24/7, so there's always going to be someone there that can be contacted if there are any concerns specific to the site at any time. And then I'm always available as a resource. I can always be contacted, and I spend a lot of time at our current both Safe Park and Safe Stay community. And the second site will be no different. I will be out there probably daily. And I don't know if Officer Shavers is part of our HEART team, and I totally forgot to mention what the HEART team is. So the city has its own kind of outreach team, which we call the HEART team, Homelessness Assistance and Resource Team. And it includes myself, Officer Shavers, and Sheila Andrews. Myself and Officer Shavers really kind of act as an outreach team that goes out and provides outreach to folks who are living outside, but we also serve as like a single point of contact for community members who are looking for a response or have a question regarding what the city's doing regarding homelessness. And then Sheila, who is our magical unicorn, is kind of our public works arm, and she is the one who is out assessing camps, both active and abandoned, for cleanup needs, coordinating all of those cleanups. And because she also has a history of working with folks who are experiencing homelessness, she also kind of doubles as outreach while she's out there. So I don't know if Tyler wanted to share any thoughts about public safety around the safe state communities, or.
Yeah, just in general, I've been a neighborhood police officer prior to being in my HEART position. So Since unsheltered homelessness really became a crisis that was very visible, lots of calls for service to police, fire, EMS back in 2015. So it's been over 7 years I've been involved. I think one of the things when you start something new is you hold your breath a little bit, hoping that would work, but not sure. We've been wildly surprised, at least from a law enforcement perspective, that the safe stays, even the safe park communities are really working as they should, based on the code of conduct and the expectations for behavior there. There's been minimal exits due to any kind of problems and almost no calls for police service to those locations, which is very exciting to see that the model, is working like we hope it would, to reduce the burden on public service, increase stabilized, living for the folks that are working through their own issues and barriers to work their way into independent living, or even if it's supportive down the road, to accept the kind of help that's going to make them a good community member, a great neighbor for everyone. So I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective in general that we're very excited about the opportunity to continue to, I would say in essence, have people kind of self-separate, those who really do want to engage in services and accept the help and be inside, versus those who are frankly the ones that a lot of people end up calling us for, that need, a little bit more law enforcement, I guess, help to get over some of the hurdles that they're dealing with in life to get to the place where they too could then, accept or be a part of, the community. So again, just excited that it's working like it has been.
Thank you. And I think that's the end of my part of the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Jamie and Adam, Brian, and Tyler for giving that overview. And we're now at that place where, I noticed as well as there's some information about heart in the chat. So I just want to call folks' attention to that as well. I just republished our conversation guidelines and we're ready for your questions. And a lot of different ways for you to do that. Again, you can put something in the chat and I'll call your attention, or you can raise your hand, either using the reaction or the raising your hand in person. There's no question too small or too big. And you might have interests about the current site, the future. So who has a question? Anything that you'd like to know a little bit more about is another way to think about it. I'll just give you a moment. Looks like Carol, go ahead. Carol, do you want to take yourself off mute? If you're talking, we can't hear you. No, it will do. I'll go to Roman. He has a question in the chat, and then we'll come back to you, Carol. What are the guidelines for people to enter the Safe State community? Can anyone enter it?
So we do, and Brian can speak to his piece of it. With the first one and with all subsequents, we do screen out people who have sex offenses. Other than that, it really is just a matter of whether or not people are interested in working on something and moving forward with their life, right? Whether it's their mental health, whether it's recovery, whether it's housing, or all of the above, employment. They need to be able to move into a space and be good neighbors within that little site, as well as the surrounding neighborhood. And that's really it, unless Brian's got something else he wanted to mention.
I would just add that we're definitely doing what Outsiders In has already done. And again, anyone that would get in, it's to better yourself. It's a transition versus just a place to come and sleep all day kind of deal. So yeah, we'll definitely be screening. And again, the key word's an asset. We want everyone to be an asset to the community, to the neighborhood and all that. So we'll do our part.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you for that question as well, Roman. Carol, if you can take yourself off mute, you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay. All right. We've got a message from Barbara around fully supporting the idea, but concern about the location being appropriate. From her perspective, the area is economically vulnerable and doesn't need additional stress. So I'm wondering, Jamie, do you want to speak to that concern around selection of this site and also that economically vulnerable
Sure.
criteria?
Yes, I can also speak to the other point that the suggestion that she made about a site over, and I think that the piece of property you're talking about is actually private property. So I can't use that.
Yeah. For folks who are going to be watching this, Barbara also made a suggestion of another site on 18th and Andreessen that's next to the Winco across from Share.
Yeah. And then as far as the economically vulnerable piece of that, so we were very careful to not put this in a zone that is a residential zone, right? Because that's what we wanted to avoid, was residential zones that are in an economically vulnerable area. This is, I think, 360 degrees around, surrounded by commercial. And then on the flip side, we also wanted to make sure that we were serving people as close to where they are as possible. And there are a lot of people camping around that area. Additionally, it's very close to a lot of the services that people utilize. I mean, this is kind of a pass-through space. People are constantly going over to St. Vincent de Paul or Share, Council for the Homeless, as you mentioned, they're just right over there. And it's right there on the Vine. So I'll tell you that site selection is like the hardest. Judy was talking about this earlier. Site selection is the hardest part of this process. And because before I became a city employee and I worked in homeless services, I can't tell you the number of times I thought, why doesn't the city just use one of its hundreds of available properties to allow people to camp on? And the reality is that we actually don't have that many properties that could be used for something like this. We have very, very few. And this just happens to be one of them. In fact, I mean, we may have to look at like another partner for sites for site 3 because there are so few.
So Barbara, just let the city know that property is for sale. Thank you for that information, Jamie. It sounds like a concern, really around this site being closer to residential. And I wonder, Adam, do you want to speak about like what the impact, what you're noticing about what's happening with the Safe State community? The first one in terms of the interaction with the neighbors.
Sure, I could do that.
Give some perspective, or at least what the experience has been so far with the first one.
It's been amazing. Constant visits from our neighbors who come to see the transformation from the area of what it was before to what it is now. I have regular communications with the landlords in all 3 apartment complexes around that area, and we regularly communicate. And it turns out that we mostly have been communicating about compliments and communicating about the difference. And when we have concerns, a lot of times we end up having the same concern about an individual that has nothing to do with our guest and our community, or even homelessness half the time. So I think it's just a matter of building those relationships with your neighbors, and we really we've had like Tyler might say, we've really had no incidents to need for police services, and virtually, and we haven't had our only cause for concern has been like any neighbor, the regular cause for concerns of regular neighborhood crime that really doesn't have anything to do with the homeless population.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, because I think, when there's an unknown out there, I know that there's, obviously, a lot of questions that can't be answered until you have that experience. And I'm wondering, Barbara, if there's Anything else that you want to raise around your concerns around the siting of this particular site? Because we got the people here who can try to give you more information around those concerns. They certainly can't predict the future. However, past performance is often the best indicator. So, and I appreciate that you're not the only person who has raised concerns around the location. And I know that that's something that the city is taken most seriously. Anyone else have anything that you think might be helpful for folks to hear around this? All right. So we're open for more questions, folks. All right. Here we come. Oh, great. I'm glad we were able to get your question here, Carol. Will alcohol be allowed on site? Can you speak to alcohol and other controlled substances?
Yeah.
I'll take that one. So I'm pretty open about this. I'm a longtime member in recovery. So no, the answer is no drugs, no alcohol. It would be not even a 3 strike. It would be a kind of a 1 strike, 1 warning if we caught it. And then there's just no exception to it, because again, it's all about transitioning. And it's hard for someone to recover if there's drugs and alcohol in their area. So we want this to be a true stay safe community. So the answer is definitely not. So, and that goes with we all know marijuana is legal and all that, but again, that's we consider it a drug, and we're just not going to allow that kind of stuff, so it doesn't trigger any of the other residents.
Okay, so very important for folks to know kind of what those requirements are for being able, expectations really of being able to live there. We've got a question from Glenn, and this looks like one for Tyler here, around how often emergency services were reported to the first site when it was an unsanctioned camp. And he says his understanding is that since the Safe Stay site opened, there's been only 2 incidents. And I know you have some information about the past and the present with regard to that location. So take it away, Tyler.
I mean, to get an actual number, I'd have to do some digging in our CAD system and report writing to sort out actual number of times we went versus like how many officers or fire trucks responded.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you just anecdotally that, I was there several times a week myself. Other officers, neighborhood police officers and patrol were called out there. Most often the complaints surrounded around garbage or trash or some visibility concerns. Sometimes it was disturbances, and not always involving the folks in the community itself, but involving folks surrounding that community. And I think we did have 1 fire incident in the camp during the time of it, unsanctioned. So fire did respond. There were a few times where ambulance were called out for medical issues. Based on a population that size, it would not be uncommon if it were an apartment complex or otherwise. But it was certainly significantly more than the 2 times that we've been out since the end of December.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have something more you were going to say, Jamie, on that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It was just 2 fires.
Okay. All right. So, I appreciate Barbara again sharing your concerns, particularly around drug issues and sex offenders close to your home. This is something that she just posed in the chat. And so I'm hoping, one, that the communication that you've heard from both who's going to be allowed into the sites as well, and the expectations, as well as the safety response, hoping that will have you at least understand that the folks are thinking about the residents there and wanting to make sure that they're as well. And certainly, as Jamie has mentioned, she's available to be in touch with, and so I hope you will continue to reach out to her, and they'll continue to listen to your.
I have also offered in the meeting that we had Tuesday, I offered to anyone interested, if they wanted to go see the first site, to go take a tour of it and see what it looks like, feels like. I'm happy to walk anybody through that site so that you can get a better idea of what these are actually like, versus maybe, the unknown, fears of what it might bring.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do that for anybody who's here.
And my sense is, I mean, part of the reason even for these conversations is to get information from all of you as well, to help make this be a success. So
Yeah.
listening continues after this meeting and will continue to inform decisions made with regard to the site. And Roman kind of asked another question that is really, part of this safety discussion, right? Is there going to be fencing, and what does that
Yes.
look like?
Yes, there will be a chain link fence all the way around it, and the fencing itself will have screening on it. So it won't just be, everybody on full display there.
Mhm. And I'm wondering if Adam and maybe Brian could speak to even like who would be admitted and how folks can actually come to this site that aren't residents. That might help folks understand what the expectations are as well.
Well, I can tell you from, at least for our site, what we did at first was, if people don't know, was there was an encampment there previously, and we were able to work with those folks before they were displaced and offer them a spot in the new community and continue to work with them during that time while the community was put in. And all the folks that filled the units on opening day were folks that were originally displaced. All of those folks are still with us except for 2. And so, but going forward, our placement process will be, we are wanting folks that are actively working with an outreach worker or outreach team and really have a desire to continue that process. So we're asking outreach folks and that individual to really have shown some work and some progress and a desire to want to come to the community and fill out an application and a letter process.
Right.
That's how we're doing.
So that's for the folks that are going to be potentially living there. What about others that are not part of that have not been accepted? How will you deal with their can they
Just like visitors?
Yeah, visitors.
I can, and that's a great question, actually. We weren't sure how or what that was going to look like at first. But we have, well, curiously so, we affectionately call our location the Outpost, and it really is generally like that. Folks that do not have a place to stay and are coming through that area looking to camp or looking to talk to someone, they usually come in and they're welcomed, they're fed, they're talked to, they're supported, they're told what's going on and the best places to get resources. Sometimes we make the phone call with them right then if they've never called for shelter. Many times we've connected them with either our outreach team or other outreach teams. So really it's a stopping point for people to gather resources as well as the support that we give to our own community members. And we have that buffer zone and we watch it carefully, and no one camps in that area, but anybody who comes to us gets supported, treated with love and respect, and with more information than when they came.
All right. Brian, did you want to add anything to what you're thinking about for Living Hope Church and the site?
No, Adam, I mean, we'll basically piggyback that same idea. I mean, there is the thought of too many guests on a property could be too much, but again, we want to create a trust environment, and we want people to feel like this is their home, their transition. And if we tell people no guests at all, it just starts becoming more of a distrust from our end and all that. So again, there will be rules in place if people have guests over and this and that, but I'm going to kind of follow Adam and Outsiders In's lead on this because they've been doing it for a few more months, but we're not real clear is what I'm getting at on how we're going to handle visitors. But again, anybody that comes by, yeah, we'll have the resources and all that good stuff for everybody. So
yeah, the goal here really is to have all of the sites, no matter however many we set up, as well as our safe park, run as consistently as possible. I mean, each organization's probably going to put their own, spin or flavor on it. But in general, the code of conduct and the way that, people behave in these will be pretty much the same across the board.
Okay, great. And that's helpful for the community to know too, that they can, that helps them to know what predictability is going to be there too. So just want to acknowledge Brandy O'Shea, who is the Maplewood Neighborhood Association Chair. Thank you for coming tonight, this afternoon. And, you're also sharing that you live in the neighborhood, and from your perspective, don't feel like it's going to make things worse, that people will have to follow rules, they'll be safe and get help if needed. That this, from your perspective, is a huge improvement over the navigation center. And so if people have questions around that as well, we can answer those. Roman has a question around funding, how the site is being funded, and was wondering if it was through tax dollars or through the nonprofits, the group folks that have been listed. So I don't know who's the right person to answer that question. Is that you, Jamie? Or
I can answer some. If I'm incorrect, Lon can step in. But it's kind of a combination of funding sources. So some of this is general fund, some of this is the affordable housing fund. Some of this can be funded through some of the federal kind of pass-through dollars, CDBG, home, etc. And if Lon's got any more like greater detail than that, he can chime in.
Yeah, in general, just kind of the broad brush on it is that the assets like the pallet homes and everything are being acquired using affordable housing property tax dollars that are dedicated through the council approved plan for homelessness prevention and response. And then the operating costs for the facilities are being funded through a combination of some general fund dollars, but mostly affordable housing sales tax dollars that are also restricted by law to emergency housing and homelessness response.
Great. And so certainly there's more information if you want more detailed information. I'm sure city folks are willing to provide that. Another question in the chat, is there a limit to the length of time a person can stay in the village? And if they don't engage in services, will they need to leave?
Great questions.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no time limit necessarily, other than there is a time limit on how each of these sites can be in those particular locations. So because we utilize a temporary use permit for these sites, they can only be in place for up to 3 years. So no one can be there for any longer than 3 years. I think our kind of target goal for folks is like 6 to 9 months, but that can vary. We may have people who are in and out within 2 to 3 months. We may have some that are, 9 months to a year, because everyone's barriers to housing, are different, and it takes people, different amounts of time to stabilize and really kind of get going. But they do need to be moving forward. So if someone's not making any progress and aren't making any attempts at progress, then this is not the space for them. They need to be doing something.
Okay. Adam, did you want to speak to experience on that?
Oh, and no, well, Jamie did a good job on it. It's for us, and we're hoping for a shorter target time. And I think that's just our motivational. It's not necessarily how it may come out. That's just our hope. It's based on behaviors more than anything else that we would ask someone to leave. We understand that people work at different paces, and so what might someone do in 1 month, another person might take 9 months, and we absolutely willing to work with that person. It's just, are we doing something? And that's the difference, and it doesn't matter how slow. So no end time for any individual, but always working at someone else's pace.
Yeah, the folks out at the first site, and this will be true at every single site. I mean, the reasons for them being there and the challenges they have are so varied. You know, we've got a guy out there who very quickly obtained full-time employment, and now he's about to connect to a transitional housing program, and you know, he'll be out on his own in no time, self-sustaining in no time. We also have an older couple out there that are like in their 60s, both of whom who are on disability, which just is not enough to cover housing. And so they're likely going to be waiting out, you know, a housing list, or, you know, the Section 8 voucher wait list. And that can take a year or more. So they're certainly not going to be kicked out because, you know, they haven't come up on the list, you know, in 6 to 9 months. We just kind of keep working with them.
Well, I appreciate the question, because what happened was it opened up an opportunity to also kind of share the diversity of folks that might be at these places, and to help people in the community understand who's there, which I think is really important. Like we all, you know, it's important for us to know who our neighbors are, and but to know as well that there's different experiences, that people are having different challenges that they need to work through. So thank you for the question, and thank you for helping expand that understanding more. Other questions? We really appreciate, you know, each time you bring something out, it helps everyone, not just the folks that are here today, but anybody who's going to be watching this, understand more about the program. So, and understand, you know, hear the concerns of other community members, right? You know, kind of understand what your community is thinking about in terms of these things. See your smile, Michael. Did you have a question? Might be smiling at something else.
Find my mute, unmute. But,
yeah.
No, I'm smiling because I think this is a wonderful program, and I've seen the work that Adam and Ren are doing, and you know, we need a lot more of it. Plain and simple. So there you go.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm sure that the everyone who's worked hard on that first site appreciates you noticing and acknowledging that as well. And certainly gratifying. I expect for Ren and Adam to be feeling that success that you're feeling, but also knowing that the community's noticing as well. And the question we have from Glenn, thank you. Can the content, questions and answers be turned into frequently asked questions? I think that is the intent, that they've been taking these questions and turning them into forms. So continue.
It is. That's what we did with the first site. We took all of the questions from the Be Heard page, as well as what we heard in these, and turned them into an FAQ. And we will certainly add any new ones from these meetings.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah. And so collectively, you know, the information about homelessness, as well as the city's approach and experience, you know, there's a continual resource to consult and build upon. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to touch base. This is what I say whenever I talk about this community, is that 1,000-foot buffer is really what makes the difference, a big part of it. I mean, we're seeing that, for one, there's actually some accountability, you know, that is enforced in these locations. And then the biggest thing is that nobody's been successful or very successful at getting people to change their lives, because they walk out of whatever structure they're in and they're immediately surrounded by the things that discourage them from making improvements to their lives. They're surrounded by, you know, more drug use and just chaos, pure chaos. That's typically what they enter once they exit their space. And so for them to be able to stabilize to the degree that they can start and working on some of those things that led to their homelessness in the first place, they have got to have stability. And so this is the biggest thing that this provides, is that the ability for these people to decompress, relax, not worry about their possessions being stolen if they leave, not worry about crime and violent things taking place, and be able to relax and start to focus on some of those things that they need to change direction on in their lives, rather than focusing on surviving from one day to the next. So that I just wanted to point that out.
Mhm. Well, appreciate your sharing that perspective. And again, hearing, you echo what Jamie's been saying. It's also, telling about how the community is responding, learning, understanding, what are going to be the more successful approaches to this. So I know that folks appreciate your support for sure. Still have time for a few more questions. I don't think we're gonna go right till 5:30. We probably don't need to at this point. But let me do a last call for questions in this formal session of the program. All right, thank you. So we've got a question here from Jane, thinking about long-term solutions. Have there been discussions about putting all services under one roof, such as Haven of Hope in San Antonio, Texas? And she's also let folks know about a great documentary on Vimeo called Beyond Homelessness, Finding Hope. So that's free until March 3rd. Thank you for that. So again, I'm not sure who the right person is. Is this in terms of the long-term future?
So I appreciate that. I actually did watch that documentary. I don't remember if you were the one of the people that sent it to me. Multiple people sent it to me actually over the last week. And it is a good one. I appreciate your comments about that. And I totally agree. I think a lot of people should watch it. They do seem to have a great thing going on down there. I haven't done a ton of additional research about what they're doing, but I have heard good things about it. Yeah, I don't mind if you put a link to it in the chat. Sorry, I was responding to Glenn. He wants to put a link in the chat. I think that there are, we certainly have not at the city level had any discussions about that specifically, although I did send the link to some of my bosses. I think that there are, there are challenges to doing things on that large of a scale. You really do have to have the collaboration and cooperation of all entities in a community, right? City, county, nonprofits, all of that. I don't think that's impossible, but we have not reached that space yet. I think I would want to be really careful about where we would cite something like that. We're talking about putting, 20 little shelters in a neighborhood right now. Can you imagine putting something of that size, in a part of town, and how people would feel about that? It's difficult to do. It's very difficult to cite homeless services. There was just a treatment center out in, was it Camas, I think? Camas or Washougal, that a lot of people really was upset about, even though we are so short on treatment beds in this community, it's desperately needed. Yet there are always people who don't want something nearby. And it's not that I don't understand that. I raise a child here, so I'm also mindful about what's happening in my neighborhood. But the reality is that we have to do something, right? We have got to be implementing effective solutions. So I don't think that it's necessarily impossible that we did something like that. It would take a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. I don't know, because I talked to Michael about this actually previously. So Michael might have some comments.
I do, if that's appropriate. That's why I raised my hand.
Go ahead.
The problems of homelessness on the West Coast of the United States are tremendously different than that of other areas of the country. They each have their own regional quirks and things that go along with how to best provide services for them. And in Texas itself, I would suggest that the number of places that enable homelessness have never been anywhere on the scale of the services and supports that enable homelessness on the West Coast of the United States. And that's a dramatic difference, is that they were able to corral the social service agencies who knew they weren't doing the total job and who wanted to do a better job. Whereas what we have here is we have 100% of the HUD funds, of the county funds, being utilized by a small number of overall nonprofits, and there are no funds left over. So the pie bucket is already spent, if you will. And consolidating that wouldn't change the funds that go in that bucket. So it's just a different situation on the West Coast, and particularly with our subservient position to Portland's problems and how they bleed across the bridge. And so it's a unique thing. Now, I didn't tour that facility, but I did talk to people in that facility, and a colleague of mine did. And I toured a similar facility in Tucson, Arizona, that had mixed results compared to the San Antonio. The one thing about the San Antonio results that I want to caution is that in 10 years, the total reduction has been 10%, 11, I believe is the number, but it hasn't been as strong as it should be with all that firepower. Houston has actually had a stronger reduction, and they've had it by not necessarily targeting homelessness. They're targeting petty crime, drug crime, and other crimes that make it, they give other avenues for it. And I hate to be taking so much of the time here. That's a wonderful video. There are real people in it that are looking for real solutions. I urge everybody to see it. And our solutions are going to be manyfold, of which safe park, safe stay, and many other things are going to be part of it. And it won't be a one-size-fits-all solution.
All right.
I think what I really appreciate about that, the model there, is that they really are focusing on the health and wellness and kind of restoration of an individual, versus just housing people. And don't get me wrong, we want to house people. We want people to be indoors in a safe, permanent space. But if we focus on just that, we are losing sight of what we really, what the goal should be. The overall goal should be a healthier community for everyone, and that means healthier human beings, right? And so the goal here really is to provide space for people to become healthier all around as they move on to their permanent space. So we're just kind of doing that on a small scale here so far, but I'd be happy to chat with and plan for anything larger in the future.
Right. So yeah, looking to future sort of the long-term goals, right? This conversation today mainly about that immediate short-term safety, health that you've talked about,
Yes.
Jamie. And I appreciate the question though, because it sort of shows our reachingness of thinking about wanting to have that solution. So we are not seeing any additional questions. And so what I'm going to do is move us towards closing. And first, just want to check in. I don't know if you guys can hear my train in the background here. Well, before we do this chat, just wanted to check in with Lon or other folks to see if there was anything else that just sort of you wanted to share in, thinking about the conversation tonight.
No, I'm just glad to hear some of the comments that are coming out from the public, because I think one of the overriding concerns for a homelessness response is this isn't a city problem, this is a community problem. And it's going to take all of us coming to the table to actually address the root causes of why people are becoming unhoused in the first place. Until we do that, at best, what we're going to be able to do is provide that stability that's needed to address the short-term symptoms, but that doesn't address the chronic side of the disease. So this one, with these projects with a 3-year term, give us a little bit of breathing room to address the worst of it, and and hopefully save some lives. But let us have the time to have those conversations in the background to put together a more equitable system that can really actually provide some longer term solutions.
So breathing room for the city, but also breathing room for these residents, and in a way that is at the least impact possible to their neighbors. Brian, anything that you want people to know, or just kind of as you start to move forward?
We're just super excited to be a part of something bigger and continually being a part of the solution. Definitely not being a part of the problem, and just restoring hope in people. We love what we do. We love all that come into our building, and we're just excited to do it. Extend that arm a little bit more and to grow a little bit deeper. I mean, we really on the church level over the past several years, we in a way serve more as kind of a trauma center, get people in these severe cold weathers in the summer and the severe hot, get food in the belly and clothes on the back. And I think this is going to be a new thing that we're excited to get into as far as getting people transitioned on into whatever that looks like for each individual. So yeah, we're super excited.
Great. It's great to hear. And Adam, anything you want to add on top of that to let the folks know?
I just want to say I appreciate everyone's attention and questions. Nancy's absolutely right. We want to hear from you. If anybody has questions that they want to contact us, our emails and our website, Facebook, there's plenty of ways to contact it. We're open to tours or questions. My organization in particular only hires, most of our folks have lived experience with homelessness and with some type of recovery. So we are building a workforce out of the folks that we do serve. And that in itself, I mean, is part of the reason that we're really excited to be doing this work. We never thought us that gone through it would be actually able to come and help others and do the work. And we're proud and we're excited to partner up and collaborate with the community. Collaboration has been the only way that we've gotten to where we're at today. And we want to continue that with all the partners in this project and any project going forward. So, and please bring your questions to us. We'd love for you to know.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. And activity in the chat, everybody's like putting their contact information, and big thank you to Brian from Michael around stepping up for this, and Living Hope stepping up for this. So now we also just want to, again, trying to make this a little bit more like in person, is we want to hear from you all too, in terms of what you're taking away from this afternoon's meeting. And so if you take a moment just to put, it can be one word. What did you appreciate about what was shared? And what's a learning or insight that you're going to take away? Just so that we can kind of get a sense of, what were folks hearing and what are they taking away? And this can be everybody who's participated today, everybody that's listening. So if you want to just type a couple of words in, and then I'll just reflect on that a little bit, and we will go ahead and close the meeting after that. So Adam's noting new movie and a model to learn about. Appreciate being heard and having my questions answered. Thank you. And that's really, our number one goal is making sure people get their questions answered and they feel heard about those questions. Appreciate people felt comfortable sharing their concerns. That's another key thing. So we appreciate that you did too. Questions, comments, participation. Awesome. People need hope, bottom line. Yeah. Well, I think the responses I'm hearing and the questions and just the approach, that is something that is generating hope for me. And I think probably for a lot of folks here today in terms of how folks are participating. Here's a few more things. I can't help but not read these out loud because they are all of your comments are pretty amazing. Thank you for the transparency and open forum model. Appreciate those who are working towards helping those in our community who need help. I love the unity in our community. I appreciated Barbara's, Roman's, and Carol's questions, as well as comments that have been authored by Brandy, Glenn, and Michael. Thank you. Appreciated everyone's curiosity and hope. I think that's the theme for tonight, for this afternoon, right? Hope and a willingness to express and look at concerns and look at new models and ways of doing things. So thank you all so much for coming to this afternoon, and want to let you know that this isn't the end of that conversation. There's still opportunities for you to provide feedback on Be Heard Vancouver. You can provide your comments. This is something I know every time somebody asks a question, it's turned back around with an answer. So just really, the city is really working hard to make sure that everybody gets a timely response to their questions. You know, there's also ways for you to be involved too. So if you're finding yourself being more interested or finding that you want to help out in some way, I think reaching out to any of these folks is a way to do that. Anna's noting what she appreciated was the gift of understanding and patience, working with individuals who might need more time with helping themselves get out of homelessness. Yeah, so there's a real caring sense to this meeting. And so I appreciate all of you brought that today. So thank you so much. With this, I guess I'm just going to say thank you again for your time. And we're going to go ahead and close out the formal meeting and stop the recording. And then we'll be around. It's 5:18.